Why does it seem to be that there is so much lack of enduring faith these days?
Good question.
I just think it's what Jesus said, the love of many will wax cold. You know, it's what's supposed to happen with, I think too, the overload of information that we got going on. I mean, it doesn't shock us to read in the paper that somebody, for instance, died or was killed by, a relative or whatever happens in the world. It's like, things have become so common and so accessible that I think it's producing callous hearts. You know what I mean? Like, nothing really shocks us anymore unless it's something global or something crazy, but we don't think individually anymore either.
I'm gonna be that guy and questions the premise of the question.
Yeah, part of it is that seem a little eschatology.
Well, I do think in some ways we've
seemed that way.
I do think in some ways we've always seen this in the life of the church, and pastors and leaders and church people have always lamented it. I mean, Paul talks about people falling away. He talks about the two that were brothers that shipwrecked their faith, and he had to hand them over. And he talks about in the last days there'll be scoffers and false teachers and all of these things. And I think at various seasons, particularly when the faith has flourished, it's also either at the time or right after that, we've seen larger falling aways at times. Places where the Reformation hit are now, devoid of the gospel to large degrees, places in Europe and stuff. Right. So it shouldn't surprise us that what we're seeing, I think, in America, and I think we are seeing this in America, it shouldn't surprise us. This is nothing new in that respect.
Charles Spurgeon, in his day.
They had the whole downgrade controversy as well. Right. So let's just, and I'm not saying that the question or the people asking this question are doing that, but let's just be careful we don't get into like the sky is falling kind of Chicken Little mindset. At the same time, I think there are a lot of different factors, and even slightly new factors. Things like technology make it easier. The way you can go anywhere on the internet and find the information that you want, or find people that already agree with you, so you can hop to a different church when you don't like what you don't have to sit and feel the conviction. You can move on. There is that very independent mindset. And that leads to kind of solo Christians, and solo Christians, I think, get picked off. But what we're seeing is just new manifestations of the same old sin problems.
It's just enhanced now with technology.
Yeah, sure.
And,
we're seeing it in new ways, but not necessarily new problems or new things.
Right,
yeah,
right.
I do think too. We've been blessed by some seasons in America recently with Calvinism resurging and people getting back to Scripture, and expository preaching really taking off in a lot of corners, and we're going to see a pushback to that. We're going to see a lot of times in church history, when you have revivals, you also then have a period of right after where people that got swept up in the revival turn and fall away. It's kind of the dynamic of the parable of the sower playing out, that people the seed was sown and it sprouted for a time, and either the cares of this world, riches and wealth, or the trials of this world turned people off. Somebody found out, hey, I'm not getting as successful as I wanted as a Christian. I'm just going to pursue worldly success. Somebody else didn't like that. Man, this Christian life is brutal and hard. These are patterns, I think, that repeat. I think too, the other thing that can be instructive is the churches, the 7 churches in Revelation. Look how many of those fell away. Some of them lost their first love for Christ. We should. I think that. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is the Scriptures have answers to these problems.
They're showing that they've been there.
Yeah.
I agree with what you guys are saying, and when I'm looking at this question, the first thing I'm thinking. There's 2 things I'm thinking. Number 1 is where. Not that I disagree with this person.
Open your eyes, Wayne. Come on now.
but what I mean by that is, like, where? Like, I hear stories all the time of people in other countries that are being persecuted that, they would consider where they're at to be the end of the world. And we've talked about this before, where people say, "Oh my gosh, we're coming on the end of the world," and it's like, but there's been persecution everywhere in the world for a long time since Christ ascended.
We've had over 200 years of being lucky and fortunate in America. And honestly, as a whole, it's made for weak and flabby Christians. Yeah. Particularly, I think in today's day and age, we have Christians right now with this COVID-19 stuff. They're more worried about losing their
life, their physical life.
Well, not just so much that, but like freedoms.
Wrong topic.
Yeah.
Don't get me started.
Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't.
That was you.
No. Talk about wearing masks or something like that. But we can, and I don't want to lose my freedoms in America either. But Christians around the world, that's not the struggle that they go through actually builds a stronger faith. Pressure is put on them, and that builds strong muscles. And we've just lived in a season where we haven't had that pressure. And maybe, I'm not saying we should just roll over and let the country change, but at the same time, maybe we shouldn't fear if things got a little harder for Christians, because when things get harder for Christians, Christianity actually tends to thrive. Real Christians thrive, and the wheat is separated from the chaff. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And
it's a hard thing, but
it's a hard thing,
necessary.
And look, I love my country. I certainly wouldn't want to see it lose its religious freedoms, but it's not the end of the world for Christianity. Is what I'm saying. And it's not the end of the Christian faith. And Christians survived for hundreds of years under way, way, way worse persecution than anything that I can see coming down the pike anytime soon in America.
For sure. I think that when God's enemies surround, God's grace abounds. And so, when it comes down to...
Are you a rapper? That really rhymed well. Have you thought a career in music?
Yeah, I look at that and I say, bring it on. If that's what it's going to be. I'm not running to get crucified. I'm not running towards the cross. Like, I'm not running and jumping on the cross and going, all right, nail me right now.
I'm just going to be like, hey, here he is, guys. Right.
I'm not doing that. But also, we shouldn't be running away. And it's like, again, I always ask that when people say, where's they see the lack of enduring faith. And I'm like, where? Here in America? Sure, I agree with you there. But in other places, no.
But, I mean, even in America, there are plenty of people that have had enduring faith, people that get saved out of non-Christian families, and they literally are putting the whole forsaking father and mother. And let's be careful we don't throw everybody in America under the bus.
Well, no, that's what I was going to say. So the second, that's what I'm saying. If you see it in America,
I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. If you see it in America, I agree. I see it too. But then the second part of that would be, the first one was second one was like, all right, I get it, but it's because of lack of discipleship. You know what I mean? Rediscovering discipleship is like something that's so foreign today.
That just means going back to the word, though, too.
Yeah.
I think giving people.
One of the things, and I've been around Christ Alone more, and I think most people there are younger Christians, and I don't mean that as a put down, because one of the things I've seen is just there's an incredible freshness to the Word of God and an excitement and a passion that sometimes when you're around churches, and I grew up in church, I've been in church my whole life, and I've had times where, maybe I didn't lose my first love, but it didn't have that vibrancy that I know it should have had. Grace wasn't. Some of those, you can be so much in the presence of God in that sense that it just kind of becomes dull. I mean, they warn pastors all the time, you're studying the Word so much, don't let it become dull to you. And sometimes we lose that, and that skews your perspective on how you see church and faith enduring. There are churches that they're preaching the right gospel, but it's like, where is your fervor for the Lord? Yeah. And then there are other places, and we need to recognize, rather than looking down at young Christians and being like, well, you just got to grow a little and mellow out. We got to realize sometimes that fervor is a God thing, and we, the Christian that's older and mature and maybe a little more settled in good ways has things that they can teach the young Christian, but that fervor that the young Christian has, sometimes they can teach that to the people that have grown up in the church. It lets them loosen up a little bit and realize that the faith is exciting. It's not boring and ho-hum and drum and, you know, a grind.
You're not going to get that at Christ alone.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's been a blessing, but that's just one thing that is stressed. The more and more I talk to people that are new in the faith or like coming to Reformed faith and stuff, they always bring up, what about discipleship? I don't know what that looks like. And it's like, it's because it was never really stressed the generation before. I don't know when it was lost because I'm 30 years old. So it's like, I can't really go back that far personally.
31 years ago, we lost it, right?
Yeah.
No,
so I came on the scene for a reason. No, I'm just kidding. But
Prophet Wayne.
But
Gonna go to his head.
That's just one thing. That's just one thing that I see, and it's like I remember saying that, you know, somebody the other day, I wasn't discipled the way that I want to see young people disciple. I wasn't discipled that way. It was kind of like, just go to this fellowship group. Go to church.
I think we're more aware and we're more intentional of it. I think growing up, I had some people disciple me, and we just didn't call it discipleship. We just did it. You know, like I think of the impact my dad had in my life. I think of one or two pastors spending time with me, talking about the scriptures, you know, answering questions as I was hungry for it. That was a form of discipleship. And
was that 31 years ago or longer?
Yeah, no comment. What are you talking about? I talked to my dad last week on the phone. No, but I think as a whole, you're right. I think the church is more, you know, and preaching is a form of discipleship. But after preaching, you know, you should still have the shepherding relationship with your pastor or pastors or elders or other mature believers.
I think that's the stuff that lost,
you know,
right there.
We can lose that aspects of the body being the body and those kinds of discipleships.
And maybe that has something to do with the size of the churches. Because a lot of people say, I've been going to my church for 3-4 years and haven't had a solid conversation with my pastor.
Yeah. But I know some older pastors who in their ministries would faithfully visit the saints, sort of the Richard Baxter model of in-home visitation and checking up, and you know, so it can be hit or miss though, depending on where you are, where you were, or how good your pastor was or wasn't.
I think it starts with the pulpit. You know, what are the pastors preaching? Because if they're preaching the word, you know, I think the outworking of that naturally should be discipleship. You know, because you see what Jesus did, and you see how the apostles reacted to that, the effect it had. It should compel you to want to disciple someone afterwards. You know what I mean? And
that's where I think it always hasn't trickled down into everybody else wanting to say to some, you know, every member of the body saying to somebody, I need somebody that I can look up to that's mentoring me, and I should find somebody else that I can do life with, you know. I think young families need to find connections with people that have kids that are a little bit older and have weathered some of those storms of the terrible twos, and how do you handle that as a Christian, and then somebody that has teens connecting with somebody that has, you know, adult children, or a single adult connecting with, you know, married couples or singles, or you know, whatever, just making those body life connections, and that doesn't always have to be top down. I mean, you need the solid preaching in the pulpit, but you also need the body to be the body. And I do think churches large and small are getting better at that. And I think even bigger churches are getting better at saying, like, we need to supplement some of the things that go on in the church with that. We can't just have a program. You need some structure to it, but you can't just program love.
Discipleship also ain't pretty either. You know, sometimes it's messy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're really trying to walk with someone who's difficult, who's making it hard for you. That's part of it too. Yeah. Like, I think what's killed discipleship is just people being picky about it. You know, like, or being overly careful about not connecting with people that need help. You know, so I think in the urban context, we're good at just jumping into people's lives and let's see where this goes. You know, we're not as safe, but we jump in and really try to love on people who, you know, some other people wouldn't even touch.
This may surprise you, but I didn't really grow up in an urban context. I mean, I know it's shocking. But I think you're right. I really do. I mean, my background and my family, we were, you know, some of the roots go back into Pennsylvania Dutch, which you're very reserved, very straight-laced, you know. Maybe you can have an amen corner in the church, but it has to be, you have to be sitting in that section. You know? And please don't raise your hands. You might be Pentecostal if you do. And
you'll never hear bro snapping. You never hear that.
Oh yeah, that was the first.
That was
awesome. Yeah, that was my first experience of preaching and somebody saying "bro be snapping." I was like, can you translate this for me? Wait, what did he mean by that?
Oh my goodness.
Man. But back to this messiness. I think there was a fear of messiness. There can be in a more institutional structured kind of church this, I need to present myself well. And I think urban context and context with younger Christians and even just younger individuals, I think, are more open to this idea of authenticity in America even. And yeah, just we have to lean into that messiness. It's going to be messy. You can't whitewash sin in people's lives and think it's okay. So you got to get your hands
doing
dirty.
what Jesus did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Surprise,
he dealt with Peter.
surprise.
He dealt with these cats that he was close to, and it's like, you know, that was messy in itself, you know, but he did it, you know, and we should follow suit.